Like the circle that keeps on circling forever, getting ever bigger, because Christ is God-man forever. So it keeps on cycling through his humanity forever. And I get all that from Isaiah 53. It's spiritual physics. Actually, it's in Isaiah 53:10, 5 LXX verbs. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that infinity means, A, you've got all the positive and all the negative, all the good truths and all the bad truths, but they're all true. Potential or real. And they have to be potential or real, or it's not full. And they have to be bad and good, or it's not full. But then you also have, second paradox is the uniting. That's what hypostasis means in Greek. Hypostasis. You have to unite all the bad to all the good. And they're dots. It's like a Georges Seurat painting. The whole spiritual M theory is you got dots that become strings, strings that close when the realities occur, and then they have reverberating effects. But the closing, how do you get them to close? You take the worst thing and you unite it to the best thing. Certain things have happened that made me understand God's spiritual physics. First thing was seeing Isaiah 53:10 through 11 in the LXX, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew text. Masoretic text, that's what's come down to us. Masoretic means that it's vowel pointed. The original text wasn't like what you see in Hebrew now. But it's so similar to the original that you can rely on it. And in fact, the Lord and the apostles did. The same thing can be said for the LXX text. And it's real important to talk about that because the LXX is often very different from the Masoretic text, and it's also older. The Masoretic text comes down to us from about the Middle Ages, but we found a lot of older manuscripts and pieces, so we're able to compare and tell, well, yeah, we've got a reliable Hebrew manuscript. It's also called the BHS, and my German is terrible, so you're going to have to look up what that means. It's the German title for Hebrew Bible of Stuttgart. Anyway, the point is that the LXX was used by the Lord and the apostles. When you were living in Israel in those days, in the first century, you had to know 3 languages in order to exist, because it was a cosmopolitan trading town. That's how Israel made its money. Everybody kept traveling through there to get to Africa and up to Europe. So you spoke Aramaic in the home. That's why we have the Peshitta, which is not the original Bible, but in many ways it's a really good translation. And you also had to know the Greek because that was the equivalent of French in the 17th century. It was just, you weren't an educated person if you didn't know Greek. And Mary really knew Greek very well. It's really funny how the angel Gabriel talks to her in Luke 1:26, but I digress. Anyway, and you also, of course, had to know the Hebrew because that was the language of the religion. So everybody was trilingual, and it was normal. I mean, I don't know why people get so upset about that. I mean, even remote African tribes today know English. You know, they knew about 9/11 and gave the President of the United States a goat. I think it was a goat. It might have been a camel. So being trilingual is no big deal. It just depends on how much cosmopolitan contact you have in what you do for a living. And all of Israel pretty much was trilingual. And they were not illiterate. You couldn't be a trading country and be illiterate. So the point is that both the Hebrew Bible, as it then existed, which was the Old Testament, and the Greek LXX were in common use, and in fact the LXX was more accessible to people, and since Greek was the lingua franca, they were more familiar with it. Well, I don't know if they were more familiar, but they were as familiar with it. Now that's really important because the LXX of Isaiah 53:10 and 11 has 5 Greek verbs that are either in addition to, which means we're missing Hebrew text, or used to translate just a couple verbs in the Hebrew of Isaiah 53:10 through 11. Now those 5 Greek verbs are quoted constantly or alluded to constantly in the New Testament. And when you analyze what those verbs are, what you find out is a circle. Now string theory is a kind of a new thing in physics, but the idea can't be new, because you can go back as far as, golly, what? It was before Aristotle. It's got to probably be with some of the ancient Chinese. Certainly in the Bible, everything's always depicted as coming full circle. I mean, when Daniel 9:24 was written, it's about bringing everything full circle. When Ephesians 1:23 was written, it's about bringing everything full circle. God started with a purpose, and he brings everything full circle. Now, a circle is another word for a point. In math, we know that a point has no dimension. The same is true for infinity. Infinity is really a logical point in true infinity, because true infinity is immaterial. So you have to call it a logical point, and math is your best representation of it. You can't, it's not limited to space-time, it's a concept, it's a principle, it's a truth. Truth is immaterial. It has no energy and no mass, yet it controls everything. And so if you're a scientist and you want to say you're an atheist, okay, fine, just call it truth, a living truth. You know, if it scares you to personalize it with the word God, then don't. But you have to admit, because we know math exists, that there is such a thing as living truth, because it controls how matter and energy operate. So you have 3 elements, really, even if you're talking as an atheist. You've got matter, energy, and living truth. Okay, we who believe in God are going to call that living truth God. And it makes more sense to do so because we're persons and we're finite, so whatever there is that you can see, it's got to be the opposite of what you can't see. And there you have your equilibrium, there you have your circle, there you have your true infinity, because true infinity would have to encompass everything that is, everything that is not, and everything that could be or would not be, but you know, has to be allowed to be a potential. Then you're talking true infinity, then you're talking about the largest attribute set, then you're talking about a set that contains all other sets. Everything else would be a subset. The truth that is would be a subset of the truth that could be. The truth that is or could be would be a subset of the truth that is, could be, and won't be, but has to be allowed to be a potential. Therefore, in spiritual physics, you've really got 5 dimensions, not 11. You've got the regular 4, and then on top of that you have all the things that might be, could be, potential. In actuarial science we call that probability. A probability can be 0, a probability can be negative. So it's as if everything cycles through the rules of truth, which are, you know, epitomized by math. Because math deals with things you can see, touch, taste, and feel, and also with things that we call not real, but yet real. In other words, you can't see them. But there's still something operating that you can't see on something you can see.